more seamless, but as a consequence it feels less premium. The most interesting part about the G5's design though is the fact that the bottom chin is removable, allowing you to swap in different modules like the camera grip or the Hi-Fi DAC from Bang & Olufsen. The modular aspect of the G5 is a very bold move by LG, and it's nice to see them trying something different, but it definitely needs some refinement. The S7 Edge or S7 is pretty much just a continuation of last year's S6 and S6 Edge. The S7 Edge is made of the same glass and metal materials, which means it still feels slippery in the hand and is a total fingerprint magnet, but it's a little bit bigger now thanks to the larger screen, and it's also a hair thicker than before. The phone is also a lot more comfortable feeling in the hand because everything has been rounded off, including the back glass and the metal frame, so it doesn't have that same sharp feel that a lot of people complained about with the S6 Edge. As far as one-handed usability goes, the G5 is definitely easier to use in one hand due to its smaller size, but overall the S7 Edge feels a lot nicer and way more comfortable despite being a bigger phone. Obviously, if you want a smaller Galaxy S, you can always opt for the regular S7. Specs wise, they are pretty much identical on the inside. They're both being powered by the Snapdragon 820, Adreno 530, and 4 gigs of RAM. So they're both extremely fast phones, and you won't really notice too much of a difference between the two in real world use, if any at all. Gaming, multitasking, opening apps, web browsing, and whatever else you do on a smartphone, both of these phones do them all very well. They both also have micro SD card slots for up to 200 gigabytes of additional storage for storing all of your photos and videos. Another similarity that these two phones share are the built-in fingerprint sensors, but the G5 has its fingerprint sensor built into the power button on the back side of the phone, whereas the S7 Edge has its fingerprint sensor integrated into the home button on the front of the phone. Whether you prefer a fingerprint sensor on the back or on the front is a matter of personal preference, but what I will say though is that the G5's fingerprint sensor is much faster to set up, and you don't have to push the power button down in order for it to read your fingerprint like you would with the home button of the S7 Edge. Both of these fingerprint sensors, however, are blazing fast and very accurate, so you shouldn't have a problem with either one in regular everyday use. Where the S7 and S7 Edge have the leg up is in water and dust resistance capabilities. It may not look like it because there's no flaps or anything covering any of the ports, but that's because all the sealing is done from the inside. So if you need that type of protection because you drop your phone in the toilet or the sink a lot, this phone will give you that peace of mind, but don't attempt to do the same thing with the G5. With the Snapdragon 820 inside, both of these phones do support Quick Charge 3.0, but if you care about wireless charging, you're only going to get that with the S7 and S7 Edge. Thanks to the modular design, the G5 does however retain that removable battery, so if your phone dies, you can simply swap it out for a fresh one and go from 0 to 100 real quick. While we're on the subject of battery life, the G5 has a 2800 mAh battery, whereas the S7 Edge has a slightly larger 3000 mAh battery, and battery life on both of these phones have been really good in my experience. If you put a lot of value or faith in screen on-time numbers as your main measuring stick for evaluating battery life, the S7 Edge is the clear winner by a significant margin, but despite the disparity in screen on-time numbers between these two phones, I've actually had no problems getting through a full day on either phone with the same type of usage. Taking a look at the displays, the G5 has a 5.3-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 2560 by 1440, and it's got everything that you would want out of a display on a flagship smartphone. It's got really nice and accurate color reproduction, great viewing angles, and it's super sharp thanks to that Quad HD resolution. 5.3 inches is also a very respectable size that you won't have any problems when it comes to things like playing games or watching YouTube. The S7 Edge has the same 2560 by 1440 resolution, but it's a slightly larger display at 5.5 inches, and it's using Super AMOLED technology just as you would expect from a Samsung flagship. This is hands down one of the best displays on the market, if not the best, and it's absolutely stunning. The colors are very vibrant and saturated, the viewing angles are nice, and it has those rich, inky, deep blacks that you would come to expect from AMOLED. The whites don't look quite as accurate or as clean as the whites of the LCD on the G5, but that's a pretty small price to pay for what is an overall very fantastic looking screen. The S7 Edge also features that curved glass that spills over on the sides, hence the Edge moniker, so when you're looking at content like YouTube videos or playing games, it creates for an awesome looking waterfall effect that you don't get with any other smartphone currently on the market. One thing that these two displays have in common is that they both utilize an always-on display feature to show basic information like the time and notifications. The one for the S7 Edge is slightly more fleshed out because it can be customized to show you a calendar, and it's much brighter and easier to see over the very dim-looking always-on display of the G5s, but it isn't exactly a make or break feature for either phone. What people really want to know the most about is how do the cameras on these two phones stack up to one another. After all, Samsung and LG produce some of the best image quality in the game right now when it comes to Android smartphones. The G5 is rocking a dual camera setup just like the LG V10, except this time it's been moved to the back. The main lens is a 16 megapixel sensor with optical image stabilization, laser autofocus, and f1.8 aperture. The secondary sensor comes in at 8 megapixels, but it's a wide-angle lens, and it's easily one of the coolest features on the G5. Not only is the wide-angle lens a lot of fun to use, but you can get some really amazing looking shots with it, and it's something that the S7 Edge is just not capable of doing. With the S7 and S7 Edge, Samsung decided to go with fewer megapixels this year for better low-light performance, similar to what Google did with the Nexus phones. It's a brand new 12 megapixel sensor with optical image stabilization and is currently the brightest lens you can get on a smartphone at f1.7 aperture. The S7 Edge is also utilizing a new dual pixel autofocusing system that's extremely fast and noticeably much faster than the G5's laser autofocusing, especially in low light. LG's camera software is very simple and intuitive, but at the same time offers a lot of freedom with a variety of different shooting modes, including slow motion, time-lapse, 4K video, the ability to shoot in RAW, and DSLR-like manual controls if you really want fine-grained controls over your picture taking. The same can pretty much be said about Samsung's camera software. It's simple, easy to use, and offers a lot of the same features that LG does, like 4K video, shooting in RAW, and manual controls with Samsung's Pro mode, but you do get some other unique features like hyperlapse and YouTube live streaming. It's safe to say that both of these cameras take fantastic looking photos, and you can't really go wrong with either one. The images are sharp, rich in color, very well detailed, and full of depth. In some situations, the photos between the two can look pretty identical, but in most cases, I noticed that the G5's images are typically more towards the warmer side, while the S7 Edge stays with cooler color tones. The other huge difference is how over-sharpened the S7's images are compared to the G5. It isn't always a bad thing, and in some situations it works in the camera's favor, but in this flower photo, for example, you can really see how aggressive the over-sharpening is, and it just doesn't look quite as natural as the G5's image. Even though the S7 is supposed to be really good in low light, the G5 surprisingly does a much better job. The photos are sharper, more detailed, and there's significantly less noise reduction. The S7 does, however, handle highlights a lot better than the G5. They're a lot more blown out on the G5, whereas the S7 is able to keep them in check, but overall the low light and nighttime shots generally look much better on the G5. As far as software goes, the G5 comes with Android 6.0 Marshmallow out of the box with the latest version of LG's custom interface, which brings a lot of changes. Generally, it has a much cleaner appearance, feels much more fluid, and LG has dialed back a lot of the software features, or at least have made them more hidden, so it's a lot less in your face. The biggest change to the UI is the lack of an app drawer, which you'll either love or hate, but since this is Android, it's not a huge deal. You can easily bring it back by downloading a third-party one like the Google Now Launcher or Nova, or if you really want to stick with LG software, LG recently released their Home 4.0 launcher, which brings the app drawer back to the G5. The Galaxy S7 Edge is also running Android 6.0 Marshmallow, and I'm basically going to be repeating a lot of the same things here because Samsung has cleaned up their interface a lot too. The animations are much nicer, and TouchWiz no longer feels slow, and this is probably the nicest TouchWiz has ever looked, but if you're still not a fan, the theme store offers a lot of options to really customize it how you want, including making it look more like stock Android. The biggest problem is that Samsung still bombards you with a lot of duplicate apps, and if you have a carrier version, the amount of bloatware is even worse, but the same can pretty much be said about the G5. With the S7 Edge, you're also getting those Edge-specific features like the Apps Edge, People Edge, Task Edge, and the Edge panels that let you see a variety of information such as sports scores, stocks, and weather. There are third-party apps out there that can do a lot of the same things, but with the S7 Edge, the features are baked right into the OS, and because you can see more information and do a lot more with it, it's actually useful now. The biggest question of them all is which one should you buy? Obviously, you can't really go wrong with either one because they both do the typical things that we expect out of a smartphone extremely well. They're both fast, they have great cameras, great displays, and good battery life. For me, I prefer the S7 Edge because it's a much more refined smartphone experience, whereas the G5 feels like a first-generation product, and in a lot of ways, it is. Surely LG will have it all figured out in the next version, but if you really feel compelled by the G5's modularity, then give the phone a shot. If you'd rather play it safe, the S7 and S7 Edge is the safest bet money can buy. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And feel free to follow us on social media. All the links will be down below, and feel free to follow me on Twitter as well. That link is also down below, and check us out at androidauthority.com for more in-depth coverage, because we are your source for all things Android.